Hey guys, what's going on? It's Eli, back with another review video. And yes, you read the title, you know exactly which Disney film it is that I'm reviewing. Yeah, definitely, because this being a Disney cult classic hand-drawn animated film, when it first came out, because, kind of mixed and such, I mean, it wasn't the best, but I think as time went by, and over the years, it did slowly but surely grew a cult following and such, and, there are a lot of people that really enjoy this one Disney hand-drawn animated feature that came out between 1963 and 4. Yeah. And not to mention, I'm pretty sure, because this is James Rolfe's favorite Disney film, aka The Angry Video Game Nerd. Yeah, him. Yes, that's right, guys. I am finally reviewing from, again, between 1963 and 4, The Sword in the Stone. Yes, The Sword in the Stone. Where do I start off? What are the first things I have to say about Sword in the Stone? Well, I gotta say, for me, Sword in the Stone is pretty entertaining and a lot of fun. I mean, yes, it's not the strongest of the Disney films. Definitely not like, say, where Snow White or The Jungle Book or any others that are the strongest ones, and Cinderella too, Lady and the Tramp, I could go on. But, still, Robin Hood, there are some memorable things about this, with the characters, some funny moments here and there, and with, the fantastic music and score by the late legendary composer of Disney music, George Bruns. I tell ya, yeah, and not to mention because, I think, because Walt Disney himself, he was unhappy with the final results of this film, especially with what Disney's top storyman Bill Peet did with this, and especially because when it came up to The Jungle Book, what Bill Peet originally brought to the story, Walt was not impressed with it, and and especially because after the results of The Sword in the Stone, and when it came up to The Jungle Book, Walt just, could not see Bill be in charge of, the next film and such. Because, after The Sword in the Stone, Walt was determined to make his next animated feature film really good, which of course being The Jungle Book. And eventually, because Bill Peet, he left the company and he proceeded on writing, his own series of books and such. He became a book writer and so on. Because I recall, because there's a book, one book that I'm very familiar with that Bill Peet wrote is a book called Eli. It's about a lion, so, yeah, but still, with what Bill Peet brought to the story of The Sword in the Stone, again, I think The Sword in the Stone is pretty good and decent. Again, not the strongest, but yeah. And fun fact, one more fun fact before I read the description / the story, and if you guys know about this, it was between either this or doing a movie adaptation of the story of Chanticleer. But Walt, he chose The Sword in the Stone over Chanticleer. And yeah, because there are several artwork concepts and pieces that the late Disney legend, I should say, Mark Davis, did for the planned Chanticleer film, which never came to be, because again, Walt chose The Sword in the Stone. However, years later, Don Bluth would do something Chanticleer, and I think we all know what that would be. So, about a rooster named Chanticleer, cock-a-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. Yeah, you should know what it is. So, anyways, enough said. As always, read the description / the story. This Disney adaptation of the classic fable chronicles of King Arthur's humble beginnings. As an orphaned child, Arthur, who was then known as Wart, wants to help his foster brother Kay succeed in becoming a knight, While helping Kay train, Wart stumbles upon a cabin belonging to Merlin, a bumbling but talented wizard. Merlin does his best to convince the boy that he is bound for greatness, and then Wart and Kay travel to London to attend a justing, I might be getting that one word right, justing contest. They learn that Merlin was right. Okay, so the film itself, because, we get a little background and such on the whole thing of the Sword and the Stone, which, for that being the title of the film, the Sword and the Stone is hardly in this film. It's in, the appearance of the Sword and the Stone is there from the beginning to the end. That's where it appears. At the start of the film, where we get a little background and such, backstory, I should say, and up to the end of the film, where Arthur, / Wart, finds and stumbles upon the Sword and the Stone and getting it out of the stone, and, he is the chosen one. So, yeah, but still, I should know that there are some movies with, however they're titled, something in the title that really doesn't have a huge part, if you get what I'm saying. So, yeah. Again, a little background / backstory on the sword being in the stone and those trying to pull it out. But for many years, as the years went by, the sword and the stone was forgotten and such, and man living in fear and so on. And we then come to Merlin himself being voiced by the late Karl Swenson, if I'm saying the last name right. Yeah, Merlin is definitely one of the best memorable characters of the film, I should say, because, with Merlin's personality and what Karl Swenson brought to the voice performance of Merlin, he's just great. Merlin is just great. Him and his talking owl, Archimedes, being voiced by Junius Matthews, if I'm saying the first name right, who would go on to voice Rabbit in The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. Him being the first voice of Disney's Rabbit in Disney's Winnie the Pooh. So yeah, and you can definitely tell, because it's Matthews' voice. When you listen to either Archimedes and Rabbit, same voice. I mean, heck, just say Sterling Holloway and Paul Winchell, because they voiced plenty of other characters, and not just their Winnie the Pooh characters. Yeah. It's from Matthews, Sterling Holloway, and Paul Winchell. Yeah. Anyways, so they live in this cabin in the woods, and Merlin, he knows everything, and he's been into the future. He knows everything, from automobiles to locomotives, television, the list goes on. Locations on the planet Earth that have not been discovered, nor have they been named yet, like Brumedo, I forgot the name of it. They say it, but Brumeda, maybe I'm having trouble saying it, but you get my point. Yeah, and Merlin knows that in a couple of minutes, a young 12-year-old lad will stumble upon their cabin, which being Wart, voiced by Ricky Sorensen, and also being voiced by Richard Reitherman and Robert Reitherman. Yeah, and let's talk about that. The whole thing of Wart / Arthur's voice sounding different and such, yeah, because some of them, they were going through puberty and such, and they had to be replaced with another young actor to voice Wart. And you can painfully tell sometimes in The Sword and the Stone, even I can. It's just, I feel like when I was watching The Sword and the Stone, it was just everywhere. From one to the other, you just hear how Wart talks and such, if it was higher or lower, oh my gosh. But it's understandable what happened, even though, because it's painfully obvious that you can tell and such. But hey, what can you do? And, obviously, because those who did the film, most notably the director, Woolie Reitherman, they did the best they could. So, and, not to mention, because Wolfgang Reitherman, he would, of course, go on to direct a couple of other Disney films, especially because after, Walt's sad passing, how Walt left Reitherman in charge of the animation and helming the next upcoming feature films after he would be gone. So, yeah. And not to mention, while we're on that subject, not to mention that The Sword in the Stone would be the last ever animated feature film that Walt would see when he was alive, and how, he didn't live to see The Jungle Book be finished and for it to come out and, for it to be a huge success. Yeah. But of course, no doubt that, of course, Walt would know and be very proud of that. Yeah. So again, because Wart, how his voice changes just randomly whenever, yeah. But, it doesn't really bother me. I understand completely, but I'm just saying, okay? And I don't know, I think Wart was an okay character. Maybe not the strongest and such, like all those other Disney characters, but, still, if you get what I'm saying. And so, Wart, he tagged along with his foster brother, technically, I guess that's the best way to put it, Sir Kay, being voiced by the late Norman Alden. Yeah, I got that right. And Norman Alden, well, he would go on to be in, two pretty well-known films that he would be in. He would be in Back to the Future and Lou's Cafe, that guy, and be one of Ed Wood's workers, in Tim Burton's Ed Wood, and who's colorblind. Yeah, that was funny. And of course he did plenty of other stuff besides those two. Yeah, and so him being the voice of Sir Kay, and Sir Kay trying to hunt a deer and such, but Wart accidentally, he didn't do it intentionally, but getting in the way and such, and, Sir Kay a couple of times just chasing after him, "Why, you little," and so on, and Wart telling Sir Kay that he'll retrieve his arrow, and when he's doing so, well, there is a wolf that's on Wart's tail, and up until Wart stumbles upon and meets Merlin and Archimedes. And from there on, because Merlin growing attached to Wart, and Archimedes, because he's just a grumpy owl. Even Merlin explains later on because why he's such a grouch is because, well, like any owl, staying up all night and not getting a wink of sleep. So, and, which of course that very well explains it. So, some of those Disney characters who can act like grumps and grouches, like, best examples, Grumpy from Snow White, Jeb the Goat from Home on the Range, yeah, them. So, they can be funny sometimes. But, at the same time, those kind of characters, they can have heart, and they can have their moments, and that's what's so good. And Archimedes does have some moments where he does show some concern, and he has heart and such. Nice to see. Yeah, so, because Merlin and Archimedes, especially Archimedes, having a tough, difficult time living out in the woods and such, and Merlin tagging along with Wart back to the castle where he lives, and Merlin packing up his gear, and one of the song numbers, and by the way, the Sherman Brothers doing the songs in The Sword in the Stone, one of them being Hitchitus Fidgetus, yeah, and knowing the Sherman Brothers, how they come up with words with whatever songs they do, like, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, that being the best example, or, and with the lyrics, especially like in the Heffalumps and Woozle song, a heffalump is woozle, a heffalump is very confusal, and so on, yeah. Or even, like, I can think of the one song in Snoopy Come Home, Fundamentability. I mean, there's more to it, but I think you get the point. So, again, Merlin packing up his gear and such, and he and Archimedes tagging along with Wart, heading to the castle. And at the castle, because, we see, of course, Kay, which, how Kay can be a jerk sometimes, and that also goes for Wart's foster dad, and also, Kay's actual dad, Sir Ector, being voiced by the late legendary Sebastian Cabot. And, and Sir Ector, he can be a jerk at times, and a lot to Wart. So, just pushing Wart aside and focusing a lot on his actual flesh and blood son, Kay, trying to knight him and so on, and what would come a little bit later, trying to make him become king and such. And Sebastian Cabot, well, he would go on, after The Sword and the Stone, he would do 2 more Disney animated films, which, of course, being The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. They started off as 3 Winnie the Pooh short films, then they were combined into 1 as a feature film, and, because he was the narrator in that, and also being the voice of Bagheera in The Jungle Book. Not to mention, all 3 Disney animated films that he would do, Winnie the Pooh, The Jungle Book, and The Sword and the Stone, he would also be the narrator. So, and he had a great voice for doing narration stuff, and especially for what he did in those 3 Disney films, And, and Sebastian Cabot, he did a lot of other great movies. And I can also think of him being in one episode of The Twilight Zone, where at the end of the episode, as they most of the time do with the surprise twists, he's actually the devil. So if you know about that episode, So, like I said, Sir Ector, he can be a jerk, most of the time to Wart. And it's funny, because Sebastian Cabot first played, pardon my French, an asshole, and then he would go on to play some humble characters, well, of course, that being Bagheera. Even Nostalgia Critic, what he had to say about that in his review of The Sword and the Stone, so So basically, what happens next is, because Wart arriving back home, and, Sir Ector and Kay, they meet Merlin, and Merlin telling them that he is the world's most powerful wizard and such. They don't believe that at first, but, Merlin doing his magic now, and, well, because he did his magic on Sir Ector, making it snow, And Ector getting Merlin's name wrong at times, calling him Marvin. That's funny. And then comes in Sir Pellinore. I think that sounds about right, being voiced by the late Alan Napper, if I'm getting his last name right, who would go on to play Alfred Pennyworth in the 60s Batman show. Yep, that's him, Alfred being in The Sword of the Stone. And by the way, because another fun fact about Alan, his grandson would go on to play a Red Power Ranger. For those of you that I'm sure maybe not a lot of you, but some of you, if some of you know about that, it's true. So, So Sir Pellinore steps in and letting Sir Ector know about this tournament that will happen in London, and the winner will be crowned king. And of course, Sir Ector, he cites his son, Kay, to, be a part of this tournament and to hopefully win and to become king. And he has his foster son, Wart, be Kay's, squire. Yeah, squire. Got that right. And also, Ector, giving Merlin a place to stay in the castle. And where he has Merlin stay is at this crappy-looking tower piece of the castle that almost kind of, when you think about it as of now, kind of almost looks like Rapunzel's tower if it, begged for money, as best said by Nostalgia Critic. Because he had a good point on that. And so, just them moving into this tower and the fact there's a lot of holes to it and how it looks like it's any day now about to just tip over, break off and such, and especially when at one point it starts to rain, Merlin trying to, stop from water coming in by putting out umbrellas and a bucket and such. And what happens next is, because Kay practicing for the tournament, and kind of not going too well, especially how, Wart, being Kay Squire, is doing the best he could. And Merlin overhearing this, and how, he has big plans for Wart, and how he thinks that there will be something great for Wart, even though, of course, Wart doesn't know that and such. And, well, what greatness will come to Wart? Well, especially when we find out what happens next, where it has nothing to do with Merlin, because Wart did it all to himself, what came along to him at the end of the film, and until I get to that. So Merlin basically, throughout most of the film, and I think some people would think that it's boring with what comes up in the film, but I don't know. I mean, I think it's all right. What's boring about it? Even Nostalgia Critic had, he mentioned it, so, but, that's his opinion, and that's everybody else's opinion, how they feel about this, where Merlin, basically teaches, Wart the ways, seeing different points of view of animals and such, and by turning him into, say, a fish, then a squirrel, and then a bird, it's not all bad to me, just when he, and besides, through Wart's experience with him being a fish, a squirrel, a bird, etc., some good lessons and so on. And, because the sequence where, he first turns into a fish, him and Merlin, and, just learning the ways of a fish and so on. And also, more song numbers that are in this, aside from Higitus Figitus and the opening song, The Legend of the Sword and the Stone. Other songs, which being That's What Makes the World Go Round, A Most Befudding Thing, I think I got that right, Blue Oak Tree, and one song, which I'm not going to mention yet until I get to, technically she's kind of the main antagonist, but there's not that much of her, especially when almost up to 1 hour into the film, we finally get to her. But until I get to her and who she is, but I'm sure you guys know already. And again, so that sequence where they turn to it, where he's a fish and such, and it's going pretty well. Up until disaster strikes, there's this scary-looking fish, especially some of those close-up shots, just like those, like, scary characters in some Disney films with those close-up shots, I tell ya. And just trying to chase after Wart as he, because he's a fish and trying to eat him. Merlin is unable to help Wart, especially since he's trapped in this sunken night helmet. He's trapped inside of it. Even when Archimedes, he was taking a nap, but he is awoken to see that Wart's in trouble, and of course Archimedes trying to help out Wart, and up until, because Merlin, he finally transforms back into his human form, and he helps out Wart turn back into his human form. And it was funny because Wart mentioning to Merlin that, Archimedes was trying to help him, and, Archimedes just trying to hide the fact what he was really doing. I did nothing of the sort. I intended to eat him, but oh, come on, Archimedes. You knew what you were doing. You have heart. So, yeah. So there's that, and, because after that, Sir Ector calling out for Wart and how, he gets in trouble, and, basically most of the time he has Merlin, clean in the kitchen and so on, and, clean after those, with the dishes and so on. And then up to when, because, in the kitchen, because golly, there are so many dishes and plates that he has to do, golly. But, sure enough, Merlin's stepping in, and he has another lesson to teach Wart about, but, good old Merlin, using his magic to help, clean in the kitchen, a faster version of Higitus Figitus, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I love that piece of music. Again, George Bruns, as I've gone on saying, whenever mentioning about George Bruns, the music and score that he brought to a good chunk of Disney material in the late 50s, in the 50s and the 60s, he was the man. He was definitely the man when it came to doing the music and score in whatever it was Disney, like if it was something on TV, the attractions, and the films, like most notably at the, for Disney attractions, what he brought to Pirates of the Caribbean. Yeah, and obviously I've no doubt that, he also was involved in the Haunted Mansion, and some TV stuff he did, like I can think of, say, Davy Crockett, yeah, and with the Disney feature films he did, from Sleeping Beauty, this, 101 Dalmatians, also some of the short films, like I can think of, say, Goliath II, and later Disney feature films in the late 60s and 70s, The Jungle Book, The Aristocats, and Robin Hood. Robin Hood and the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh being one of the last Disney materials / films that George Bruns would do. Yeah, just like the vibe and feel of the music that he brings, and into whatever situation is happening, just fantastic. And especially because, well, with the dishes being cleaned, with magic, just how the music is done, and just a faster version of Hidgetus Fidgetus, yeah. And, Ward even telling Merlin that he's supposed to do it, but Ward, I think it's best to let Merlin's magic do that for you, because so much, you couldn't get it done in one day. but Merlin's magic could. So the next thing that Merlin teaches Ward is from the point of view of a squirrel, yeah. And yeah, that one sequence with them as squirrels, how it seems like it's going pretty well up until it starts off with Ward, then Merlin. They come face to face with girl squirrels, and the little girl squirrel being voiced by Jenny Tyler, and the old lady squirrel that, finds Merlin attractive as a squirrel, of course, being voiced by Martha Wentworth. Yeah. And Martha Wentworth would do a couple of other voices, like she was the voice of the Scullery Maid. Yeah, I think I got that right. And one other character who I will get to later on, because we haven't gotten to her yet. So yeah, that whole sequence, just, Wart struggling to get away from the little girl squirrel, and up until when that starts to happen with Merlin, when that old lady squirrel shows up. Not to mention, the wolf is back, because, yeah, the wolf, which I didn't talk about the wolf that much, because, yeah, a wolf that has a couple of funny moments, and him trying to, go after Wart and such, but just always is, like, stumbling and such, and never getting to Wart, up until when he almost has his chance when he's a squirrel. Even Archimedes, like, he must have been unaware that Wart transformed into a squirrel. Like, should he have at least known, instead of, like, saying to Wart as a squirrel, shoo, go find your own tree? Yeah, and even, yeah, because when the wolf is trying to get after Wart as a squirrel, but nice to see that the little squirrel, who just can't keep her paws off of Wart, helps out Wart getting almost eaten by the wolf. And yeah, I think because Wart, he does the same thing too. And for poor Merlin, because him having to deal with a lady squirrel too, an old lady squirrel, up until he finally transforms back into his human form, and the old lady squirrel is terrified, even Merlin barking at the old lady squirrel like a dog. And then finally, because after the wolf is taken care of, and the little girl squirrel cuddling with Wart, Merlin finally turning Wart back into his human form, and also, like, a lot of magic words that Merlin says, pretty creative magic words, and of course, there's Alakazam being in there, and that being used to transform, like, say, him or Wart back into their normal selves, or if to stop any magic, anything that's going on. So, yeah, transforming Wart back into his human self, and the little girl squirrel is shocked, and, she gets upset. And I'd say, it is kind of an emotional moment, and especially Merlin giving Wart a lesson about love, and how, love can, how it can hurt sometimes and such, however Merlin said it. And yeah, Merlin, he had a good point. He for sure had a good point. And even Wart, he felt bad for the little girl squirrel, and, he tried to tell her, and how it just, well, it wouldn't work out since she's a squirrel, and he's a human boy, so yeah. So after that, well, we come back to the castle, and with the kitchen and that scullery maid, like as I mentioned, being voiced by Martha Wentworth, alerts Sir Ector and Kay about evil magic, in the kitchen, even though it's not evil magic. They're not thinking straight. And yeah, just them stepping in the kitchen and, Sir Ector, at times he would say, "Gadzooks," and then him trying to fight off the magic, the dishes, and Kay struggling. And up until Merlin and Wart come back, and Merlin stops the whole thing, and Sir Ector just letting Merlin have it, thinking that he's doing evil, dark magic, and so on. And even Wart, he's defending Merlin, but that doesn't work, because Sir Ector just, telling him that, he's no longer going to be Kay's squire, and any chance of Wart tagging along to, England and such. Yeah, poor Wart. And a sad moment, and especially because, Merlin apologizing to Wart that, he's sorry for what he did, but Wart assures Merlin that it's okay, it's not really his fault, and yeah, that's nice to see, and for what Wart says to Merlin. Also, I'd like to point out that there is a bit of music in that one scene where Merlin, he apologizes to Wart in the kitchen, because, when Wart is sitting there sad, a bit of that music, that would be reused in the Jungle Book. Because, yeah, if you can really tell, because there were plenty of times in some of the Disney animated films where George Bruns was involved in, where he would reuse bits and pieces of music that he did in previous Disney materials, Well, I mean, it's his music. I mean, what's wrong with that? I mean, hey, John Williams and Danny Elfman, they did something like that. Golly, I can think of, John Williams, him reusing bits and pieces of his music in, say, Episode 2 of Star Wars and the second Harry Potter film, so that's an example for you. Yeah, so continuing on, because at the crappy tower piece in the castle where Merlin and Archimedes are residing, there's more teaching for Wart, and this time Merlin leaves it in the hands of Archimedes, like writing and education and stuff like that. And it seems to be going pretty well a little bit later on, and up until where flying is mentioned, and how, in the future, because man will learn to fly, and with aircrafts and so on, Archimedes, he thinks it's a complete joke, and Merlin assuring Archimedes that, man will fly and such, and Wart starts to dream about flying. He dreams of flying, and then Merlin turning Wart into a bird, and thus, the next animal that Wart transforms into, which being a bird, and Wart learning to fly and such, and Archimedes helping out Wart learning to fly and such. Once again, disaster strikes, trouble happens when, a giant hawk, I think, it's a hawk, trying to snatch Wart, and up until Wart stumbles upon another cabin in the woods, where Madam Mim resides. Madam Mim technically being the antagonist of the film, even though there's not that much of her, because we've made it into, almost an hour into the film, and now we finally have Madam Mim, and Madam Mim being voiced by Martha Wentworth. So the whole sequence with Madam Mim, I think, Madam Mim is another memorable character in this film too. What Martha Wentworth brought in the voice performance of Madam Mim, pretty good, because, how most of Disney villains they're not only evil, but they can show a funny side to them. And Madame Mim in this case, and, you know, Madame Mim meeting Wart as he's a bird, and, you know, she, of course, is well aware of Arthur, and Madame Mim having her own song number, which, of course, being Mad Madame Mim. And if I did or did not say this before, because in this review, some of the songs that mostly sung by Merlin and the one that Madame Mim sings, which being all about her, Mad Madame Mim, there's not that much singing because usually they're just talking with the lyrics, you know? So, but I think, yeah, there is a bit of singing and such, but not that much, you know, if you get my point, and if you know, you've seen the film. So Madame Mim, you know, singing all about herself and the magic she has up her sleeves and how she can transform into anything, you know, like a ugly-looking hog or a beautiful, dazzling girl and such. Yeah, and how, well, because it seems like Wart is in trouble being in the presence of Madame Mim. Like, Madame Mim was, you know, almost about to, you know, destroy Wart, as she says, and even, like, transforming into a cat, chasing after Wart as a bird and such, and up until, well, because Archimedes, you know, he was behind Wart's tail, and of course, he saw that, well, Wart being in the presence of Madame Mim, and yeah, Archimedes knew that Madame Mim is trouble, and thus he went to alert Merlin. Merlin showing up and confronting Madame Mim, and then coming up to, yeah, I think, yeah, for a lot of people, this would be a memorable moment in this film. The wizard duel between Merlin and Madame Mim, them transforming and turning into different animals, like from big to small, and, you know, who will win this wizard duel, and it's really clever and good attention to detail, you know, because with their colors, because whichever animal, creature they turn into, they're always blue and purple, because Merlin wearing blue and Madame Mim wearing purple. Gotta slow down a bit. And the same goes for Arthur, because his color is kind of yellow and orangish and brown, you know, and whenever he transformed into that, into a fish, a squirrel, and the bird, it went with his color, like what he's wearing, and his hair color, and so on. Pretty clever. And, well, because with Merlin's beard and hair, of course, and Madame Mim's hair as well, because whichever creature, animal they turn into, also having the color of their hair and such, and Merlin's beard. And of course, the wizard duel is pretty funny. Yeah, because like Madame Mim, transforming into different animals, what she turns into, like from a gator, a rattlesnake, a tiger, and yeah, an elephant, a rhino, and up to turning into a dragon. And I think, yeah, that was in the rule of the wizarding duel that Merlin said, you know, no turning into dragons. And for Merlin, some animals and creatures that he turns into are like, say, a mouse, a rabbit, a turtle, and a couple of others, yeah. And, yeah, because with her turning into a dragon, because, you know, and her telling Merlin, was there a rule of not turning into a purple dragon? No, and so on. And what Merlin does next, because, well, you think Madame Mim won the wizarding duel. Well, no, because Merlin had disappeared when he got into her clutches as a dragon. Well, he's nowhere to be seen, but his voice can be heard. What he turned into is something very small. He turned into a germ, affecting Madame Mim, making her sick, and with red polka dots and such. Yeah, she's very ill. And that's her defeat, and her being stuck in bed, trying to feel better. And Merlin, just like, I guess like to make things worse, like he brings in the sunlight, and that kind of makes things worse for Madame Mim. Well, that's technically what she deserves, and that's the last we see of her as they leave her cabin/cottage, and they head on back to, well, the castle. And back at the castle, because one thing about the tournament and them going to England was they would go after Christmas and around New Year's Eve day, etc. So when that happens, and of course it's winter time, well, they'll soon leave for England, and yeah, because Kay got a new squire, that being Hobbs, but unfortunately, they are informed that Hobbs is not feeling well, sick like a toad, because yeah, they mentioned the word toad. And so Ector places Wart as Kay's squire once again, and now Wart has his chance to, this time for sure go to England, and thus for him becoming a squire, and he lets Merlin and Archimedes know. Archimedes, he seems okay with that, because, very nice boy, as he says. But Merlin, oh, he's pissed. Like, he is not happy. And after everything he taught Wart, even up to the point where Wart, especially after the wizarding duel, and yeah, because what he learned and how he would be very smart and using his brain and such, and for him to become a squire, that sets off Merlin just instantly. Merlin very upset with Wart, and, well, basically what Merlin does next is he travels to Bermuda, yeah, I think I got that right, which, at the time of, the time and setting of this, Bermuda is an island that hadn't been discovered and named yet. Because again, Merlin knowing everything in the future, in the 20th century and so on. And so, they all travel to England. Even Archimedes, he tags along with Wart. Nice to see. Because, yeah, Archimedes not tagging along with Merlin. So, yeah, nice to see that, again, that he travels along, and tags along, I should say, with Wart to England. And thus, the tournament happening, and very soon, Kay is to go on and do the tournament, and hopefully be crowned king. And unfortunately, Wart accidentally forgot Kay's sword. Kay, of course, getting pissed at Wart, almost like chasing him and such, like, "Why, you little," and so on. And, Wart telling Kay that he'll go back to the inn. Yeah, that's the name of the place, inn, with the swords and weapons. Going there, but when he gets there, both him and Archimedes, inn is closed. Well, because of the tournament. And then both Wart and Archimedes, they spot a sword in the stone. Yeah, because we once again see the sword in the stone, and even Archimedes was telling to leave the sword alone, especially when he was touching it. Like, even when he touches it, even without trying to pull it out by touching it, well, because heaven lights happen in the choir and such, and sure enough, Wart, he pulls out the sword in the stone and takes it to, and gives it to Kay. And then Ector notices that there's some scripture on the sword, "Whosoever to pull the sword out of the stone," etc. And one guy, being voiced by the late legendary Thurl Ravenscroft, Black Bart, he notices the sword, and, he realizes that it's the sword in the stone, and, alerting everyone, "Here, the sword in the stone has been pulled out." And, Sir Ector confronting Wart about that and where he got the sword and such, and of course he tells the truth. But everybody, they just laugh at him, because, like, "Oh, a young lad like you pulling out the sword in the stone," and Sir Ector thinking that Wart is lying, but of course Wart wouldn't be lying, and, well, and to prove so, they go to the stone, and which, Wart calling it an anvil, which, yeah, technically it is an anvil, and thus putting the sword back in the stone / the anvil. And even before Wart, pulling it back out, Kay stepping in, because he wants to see if he can pull it out, but he can't, and everybody else joining in, trying to pull it out, up until, Black Bart and Sir Pellinore, they both step in, and they tell them, let the young lad pull the sword out of the stone. They're turning to Wart. And Wart does so, and when he pulls the sword out of the stone, everybody is shocked. They can't believe what they're seeing, especially Sir Ector and Kay, and once again, Ector saying, by Jove. And thus, they all bowed to him, and, now he's king. Long live the king! And, they now know his name, Arthur. And even Sir Ector, he apologizes to all that he's done to his foster son. Even Ector telling his, flesh and blood son, Kay, to bow down to his king, which, being his foster brother. Even, it's nice to see, because Kay kind of does have a look like, but it changes because, he should know by now, and that he really needs to respect Wart and how hard he was, and how Nostalgia Critic said it. Yeah, best said by Nostalgia Critic, because when he explained that about, Kay having a look on his face, but then it changes, good, that's a good detail right there with some characters, like the facial expressions and so on in animation, yeah. And thus, Arthur at his throne, and it seems like Arthur kind of doesn't seem to be enjoying being king. Even Archimedes, telling Wart/Arthur that he should have left the sword alone, and then trying to escape. But, when they're trying to, get outside, everybody is out there, chanting, "Long live the king!" So they're pretty much stuck there. And, well, Arthur just has to accept that he's now King of England, King of the Britons, and so on. And as, Monty Python the Holy Grail puts at it. And, well, Arthur, he wishes that Merlin would be there and to get help from Merlin, and thus Merlin does show up after having a vacation/trip to Bermuda. Yeah, I think I am saying that right. And, well, he can see that, well, Arthur is now king, and you know what? He had no help from Merlin because, like I said early on, what would happen with what would happen with Arthur at the end of the film? He would do it all on his own. Something good and great for him, and becoming king. Yeah. And thus, yeah, because the ending to it, and last bit of dialogue from Arthur and Merlin, and Merlin telling Arthur that in 1,000 years, his name will be legendary, and there will be books written about him, and a motion picture about him. And Merlin explaining to Arthur, it's like television, but without commercials. And, yeah, and thus the movie ends. The end. A good/funny way to end the film. Disney's The Sword in the Stone. What a great, memorable Disney animated feature film this is. It may not be the best, but it's still memorable, and, it did grow a cult following and, of course, became a Disney cult classic. The story is not that bad. The characters are pretty good, most notably Merlin, Archimedes, and Madame Mim. The music, of course, fantastic, done by the one and only George Bruns. The funny moments and emotional moments, everything about The Sword in the Stone, pretty good and entertaining. And I'm giving The Sword in the Stone, it's on my mind. I'm giving it 7 out of 10 stars. Yes. 7 out of 10 stars for Disney's The Sword in the Stone. And what about you guys? What did you think of Disney's The Sword in the Stone itself? Is it in your top favorite Disney animated feature films? Which is your favorite character? Did you get any good laughs? Do you remember seeing this, when it would be shown on TV, watching it on VHS, DVD, and, watching it on Disney Plus? And all that I've had to say on this film. And what did you think of my review? Leave comments and give this review video a like, as always. And so, with all that being said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed my review of Disney's The Sword in the Stone. More review videos are on the way. They're going to be awesome. Keep looking forward, and I'll see you guys in the next video / review. Take care, and peace out. Higitus Fidgetus!